So I'll start the recording for YouTube or whatever as well. And there we go. So let's just begin by reading the actual text itself. This is from the ZhuangZi. It's book 2, Qi Wu Luan, and we will read through it, and then I'll go back to the start and I'll give some of my thoughts on it and why I'm reading it and what I make of the various chapters or sections. And if anyone wants the mic, just let me know. I'm always very liberal with giving it out. And the copy we're using is actually a recent book. It's by Harbs, Mayer, and Williams. It's called The Inner Chapters of the ZhuangZi, with copious annotations from the Chinese commentaries. And it does have a lot of, I guess it drops them as footnotes, but a lot of annotations with from various commentators. I own one of the commentators they use a lot, the Guoxiang's commentary, which I want to say a new edition came out like a couple of years ago, and I picked that one up. And I also have here the first copy of ZhuangZi that I ever bought, which was it's the Library of Chinese Classics. It has the Gu one or the Yuan one or whatever, the old version. Then it has a new Chinese translation, and it has an English translation. And I bought that, it must have been like 20 years ago or more, in China actually. So I have a bunch of translations here. I think I have a little section of excerpts and things from I think it's the Watson translation, but I don't have that in front of me right now. But anyway, this is this translation that we see in the, I guess the Nest or the Jumbotron or whatever we're calling it these days, is it's kind of done as a poem, right? They break it out into sections. Usually, well, in all my other translations, it gets translated just in prose as paragraph by paragraph, but here we have it in sort of a line by line sort of poetry, I suppose. I don't really read much poetry. But at least it makes it, I think it makes it easier to read actually. And there's some literary tradition of reading the ZhuangZi this way that seems to have grasped the authors or the translators. But anyway, here we go. It says chapter 2, Qi Wu Luan, a disquisition that levels all. 2.1, and we're just going to read 2.1 today. 2.1, losing oneself in the music of nature. South Wall Ziqi knelt. It's got a typo right on the first line. Kneel or knelt, but we're going to go with knelt. Lounging on an armrest. Looking up at the heavens and softly exhaling. Mesmerized, as though he had lost his counterpart. Oh, Roger. Welcome. We had just started reading. I'm actually going to go back to the beginning and read. It's good to see you. Chapter 2, Qi Wu Luan, a disquisition that levels all. 2.1, losing oneself in the music of nature. South Wall Ziqi knelt, lounging on an armrest. Looking up at the heavens and softly exhaling, mesmerized, as though he lost his counterpart. Yan Cheng Ziyou was standing in attendance before him, and said, "What is this? Can one's physical shape really be made to resemble a shriveled tree? And can one's mind really be made to resemble dead ashes? The one now lounging on the armrest is not the one previously lounging on the armrest." Ziqi said, "My dear Yan, you surely do well to ask this. At this point, I lost my ego self. Do you understand? One may have learnt of the pipes of men, but that does not mean one has yet learnt of the pipes of earth. You may have learnt of the pipes of earth. That does not yet mean you have learnt of the pipes of heaven." Ziyou said, "May I ask, then, how this works?" Ziqi said, "Well, when the great lump burps up vital energy, it comes to be called wind. This is quiescent. But when active, the myriad cavities howl furiously. Surely you have heard the soughing gusts. Oh, for fuck's sake, someone's calling me. There we go. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so we'll at least have one good recording. This recording will probably be me swearing at my phone, because when you have a space and someone calls you, it messes it up. The other recording will actually be a decent recording of it all. I'll go back a little bit so that we can at least catch where we are. Remember, we had Nanguo Ziqi, or South Wall Ziqi, was leaning against a wall, leaning against his armrest, mesmerized and lost in thought. And then his disciple or student, ZhuangZi's, comes up and says, "What is this? Can one's physical shape really be made to resemble a shriveled tree? And can one's mind really be made to resemble dead ashes? The one now lounging on the armrest is not the one previously lounging on the armrest." Ziqi said, "My dear Yan, you surely do well to ask this. At this point I lost my ego self. Do you understand? One may have learnt of the pipes of men, but that does not yet mean one has learnt of the pipes of earth. You may have learnt of the pipes of earth, but that does not yet mean you have learnt of the pipes of heaven." Ziyu said, "May I ask, then, how this works?" Ziqi said, "Well, when the great lump burps up vital energy, it comes to be called wind. This is quiescent. But when active, the myriad cavities howl furiously. Surely you have heard the soughing gusts. The mountain forest stands tall, with the cavities of the 100-span immense trees, as if they were noses, mouths, ears, roof supports, coops, mortars, pools, and puddles. When they get whipped into action and hoot, shriek, gasp, yell, moan, guffaw, and howl, then those which take the lead sing out whoosh, and those which echo sing along with a swoosh. When there is a cool breeze, they produce a minor consonance. When there is a whirlwind, they produce a large consonance. And when the fierce storm ceases, the myriad cavities fall silent. Haven't you also been exposed to this soughing and seething sound?" Ziyu said, "So, the pipes of earth are all those cavities, and the pipes of men are those lined up bamboo tubes. But what about the pipes of heaven?" Ziqi said, "Well, when the pipes of heaven blow, they are infinitely varied, and they come of their own accord, with all completed of its own accord. Nothing lies behind the puffing into action." That's section 2.1 of Qi Wu Luan. And so again, what I want to do is go back and reread it slowly, but sort of give it some commentary of my own, and we can also explore some of the commentary from this translation that I have in front of me, because again, it does. I guess the whole purpose of this book is actually to preserve all the different commentaries and bring them together so that readers can access it easily. The title itself is actually very interesting. A Qi Wu Luan, a disquisition that levels all. It obviously gets translated different ways. There's a bit of a question, it seems, as to how to pass it out. It's 3 characters, right? And so the disquisition is going to be that last character, Luan. And Qi is going to be the leveling out or flattening. And the Wu is going to be things. Like if you have read the Tao Te Ching, I don't read the Tao Te Ching that much, but the you'll have like a Wan Wu Zhi Mu, the mother of the 10,000 things, like right up at the beginning of that text. And that's the same Wu. So you have this. If we were to translate it and put together Qi and Wu, then it would be like the flattening of all the things, or the all things being equal, or all things on the same level or plane, and then the disquisition of that. How are all things equal? How are all things flat or on the same plane? I saw a person on Weibo discussing it actually recently, and he literally translated it as all things, flattening it all out. It was what did he say? 万物是平等的. It's like everything is that. But another way you could read it is you could take the qi separately, so the flattening or the leveling or whatnot, and we know that's how to interpret that character also from the commentary Could be interpreted differently, I suppose, but that seems to be the reading of it, flattening or leveling out or making things equal. We could take the first character by itself, and then the wu luan, so the like discourses of things or discussions of things or essays and stuff on things, and kind of show that all these different positions and all these essays are in some sense all the same at the end of the day, I suppose. And that's actually not a bad translation either. It's not the one that this book uses or that many of the commentators use, but some of them do. And later in this chapter, we'll see people saying, you know, what's right for you might be wrong for me, and therefore the thing is both right and wrong. So yeah, you could say it's almost like a leveling out of the different perspectives or essays or positions. But yeah, interesting title. Obviously it appeals very much to me because I think that everything is ultimately equal or equivalent or common in the sense that it all is. And that's an idea that I think gets visited a lot in this chapter. What do we have here? South Wall Ziqi. You know, I don't know why they call him South Wall. It does say South Wall or South Outer Fortification. But I guess it's like Ziqi of the South Wall is sometimes how it could be put. Or I would just call him, you know, Nanguo Ziqi. But that's essentially why it says South Wall there. You see, it's like Ziqi of the South Wall. Or maybe there was some famous guy who just hung out at the southern fortifications of a city or something, and that's the name he got. I don't know. Yeah, so he's there. He's leaning or lounging on something. He looks up at heaven. He's exhaling. Yeah, and it's he kind of. What's interesting is the use of counterpart here, as if he had lost his counterpart. So I think a big part of this chapter and this section as well is going to be going beyond the you and me, or the this and that. And so we will wind up using this almost, well, it's almost for the whole book. It's like a focal point. It's like this idea of going beyond the divisions or the perspectives and having a more holistic view. So this guy is essentially sitting there, and he's forgotten about himself, and he's forgotten about the other person, and now everything is just one, I suppose. It says counterpart here. I guess it's a translation for O, which is like, yeah, so it's like a pair. So he's forgotten there's a pair of them. Now it's all just one. I do have a copy here again with all the commentary. I didn't put it in the photograph, but the you know, there's some, it looks like in the commentary there's some disagreement about whether all things can be flattened out, and then it must just be saying that the different perspectives are flattened out. But yeah, so some commentators have passed the title differently, and they have construed the leveling to be of accounts of things. Yeah, things have their basic natures. They cannot be leveled. What can be leveled are only our accounts of them. That's a Yan Fu. But I tend to like the other translation where we're saying that at the end of the day, everything is common to everything else. It is what it is. It all is. So of course I like the former translation more. He says, you know, Yan Cheng Ziyou, standing in attendance before him, and said, "What is this? Can one's physical shape really be made to resemble a shriveled tree? Can one's mind really be made to resemble dead ashes? The one now lounging on the armrest is not the one previously lounging on the armrest." I'm a fan of that. The way they've phrased it. Because again, what's the whole point? He's there sighing and staring up at heaven, and he's forgotten that there's a you and a me, or there's a counterpart. There's two people, and so he's his physical shape is like a dead tree or a shriveled tree. His mind is like dead ashes. He's no longer himself. He's now gone beyond that to the whole or the unity. And it drops a footnote here. It says this actually winds up becoming a popular, well, not popular, but this saying gets referenced in other texts as well. Here we go, Roger. I'll add you as speaker. There you go. Feel free to jump in if you have something to add, Roger. Are you able to speak, Roger? Well, hopefully it will allow you to. I see it's keeps switching back between speaker and listener, but well, hopefully the app decides to behave itself and let you speak. Just Oh, there we go.
Sorry. I was just wrestling here with my Bluetooth headphone. I was going to say, I find it really interesting how in this text we see both the concept of things changing with time, but also this idea that that's not the whole story. You can interpret reality like that, but you wouldn't be looking at the whole picture. If you look at the grand scheme of things, you see that everything is leveled, and everything is interconnected, and everything is the same of the same. So there's time and time flows, but people shouldn't get so stuck with time flowing, because our very own perspective through time might trick us into thinking that there's only slices of time. Like like he alluded to, the man that is sitting in the chair is not the man that is currently sitting in the chair. Of course, there is across time there is change, a bit like Heraclitus talked, but that's only that's a really small perspective of things that can trick people. It's kind of like the way of truth in the way of what's the name? The second way in Parmenides' poem.
Oh, the way of seeming, or doxa.
Yeah, the way of truth and the way of appearance. I think.
Yeah, appearance is another way I see it translated. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just my thoughts for now.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's really interesting that you mentioned the passage of time there, and you referenced the person. I'm just flicking back to that page. The person who is now lounging on the armrest is not the one previously lounging on the armrest. The way I read that, or what I read into that was, the person had previously been part of the pairing, right? The student and the teacher, or whoever these two people are, ZhuangZi's and ZhuangZi's. These two people were sitting there, and then they were a pair, and I guess they were communicating, I think this, you think that, etc. And then at some point, ZhuangZi's, looks up at heavens and softly exhales and forgets that there's a pairing. And then when he's done this, maybe he has transcended the conversation, or transcended the fact that there's two, and now he just recognized them all as this one scene. And the person, ZhuangZi's, says, "Oh yeah, the guy I was chatting to, the one that was resting here, is different from the person that I now see before me, the one with the shriveled tree and mind like dead ashes. You've now transcended or gone beyond." So I read it that way. I read it as, I was talking to another guy. Whoops, we got a bit of a feedback there.
That's a good point. Sometimes time can pass, and we don't change that much. We are still kind of egoistic, attached to the ego and whatnot. But sometimes time passes and something really special happens. People acquire wisdom, which is not a given. Time passing is a given throughout our lives. But acquiring that kind of wisdom to do that kind of self-noting, to become so detached from the ego that the person before this process is considered, for this person talking, just a really different person. That's that's something even more special than just the person I was a moment ago is different from the person I am now. It's more than that. There was some effort there for doing self-noting, like Aldous Huxley mentions in his Perennial Philosophy, this concept of self-noting, of annihilating the ego.
If there's a process of annihilating the ego, it also goes into sort of a project that I've been working on now, and one of the reasons why I revisited ZhuangZi, because I think he's relevant to a project that I'm currently working on, which was, obviously I like metaphysics, but when we discuss morality as well, I want a way to tie morality and tie how we ought to behave in a very clear way to the metaphysics that I believe in. And one thing I was thinking about was maybe there's a story we can tell here about how people grow up and how they ought to die. I mean, Socrates says that at one point he describes philosophy as the practice of dying, I suppose. And so how would in ZhuangZi, in this section, philosophy as a practice of maturing or dying look like? And I think ZhuangZi tells us something, or offers us something that I can really use here in telling that story of how we ought to mature and the role of philosophy and metaphysics in that. Because, what did ZhuangZi realize? He went beyond the counterpart, the pairing of two, and he recognized it just as one and sort of identified himself with the whole. At least that's my reading of this general book or chapter. And he's presumably the teacher, or at least an adult here. And in forgetting himself, is that equivalent to reaching the end of one's life? Is that, literally it says, Wu Sang Wa, it's like I lost or destroyed or I died myself. Like, is that like the culmination point that one should prepare for at the end of one's life? Because when we're like a little baby or something, presumably children only think about themselves. At least immediately after birth, they expect everyone to wait on them, if they're even aware of anyone else. And they're certainly not identifying themselves with a larger family or a community or a species. They're just a baby and they want resources and they're going to scream until they get them. And they're going to rest and they're going to grow. It's very self-centered. It's all me, 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 me. And then I suppose as they mature, they'll get this sense of a broader picture. So there'll be me and you, or them, or self in the outside, external world. And so you can tell that story. And then, well, what do we get then at the end of life if in our infancy we were all inward-looking self and trying to grow, and then as we attain adulthood, we've become aware of the outside world and are sort of becoming more both a me and a you, and fitting ourselves into that picture of the you and everything else and figuring out where we are in that picture. What is Socrates then expecting philosophy to be? What is the practice of death at that point? And maybe what we have here from ZhuangZi or ZhuangZi is we have that next step. It's I, as a baby, had the me, where I was inward focused and growing myself. And then I then realized my place in being or in society or in the family unit. And I understood there was a me and a you. And that we could harmonize them and recognize these divisions, but try to bring them together and put them all in their proper place. And then in his death, he's, Jinzhe Wu Sang Wa. At this point, I lost my ego self, is the translation here. And so he's now gone beyond the O, or the counterpart, or the pair of two. And his body is like a Gao Mu, and his mind is like a, what is it here? We got dead ashes, the translation. Shriveled tree, dead ashes. Because now in his seniority, and he's recognized himself and the other, and now his philosophy has allowed him to go beyond and recognize it all as one, and no longer identify with himself as opposed to others. Maybe that is the correct way to be at the end of one's race, when the race is run, and now how should you feel about it? Well, it's all behind you, and now you can associate with the whole and appreciate the whole and not play partisan for yourself or identify others as the other. But so that's a project I'm working on, and why I find this particular section of ZhuangZi very, very meaningful and inspiring for what I'm currently writing about. But Roger, I saw you put your hand up. Feel free to speak.
Yeah, sure. This concept of going beyond the pair, and one could interpret going beyond this duality as stop eating from the tree of good and evil in Genesis terms, or stop being a positivist or a negativist in Buddhist terms, or stop seeing the yin yang as the manifest Tao, and starts to contemplate the unmanifest Tao that is formless, shapeless. And you also kind of see in this text the mention of the pipes of men, which it's kind of mentioning perhaps a Confucian thought, which is more earthly and focused on the affairs of men, and then the more down-to-earth Taoism that is the pipes of nature, that is concerned with the manifest Tao, how Tao manifests in nature, and then the pipes of heaven probably is a reference to the unmanifest Tao which cannot be we cannot speak about that Tao, that it's unfathomable.
Yeah, as we go through this, I'm going to read the whole book, just section by section. But as we go through this book, we're going to have an explicit discussion of right and wrong, or good and evil, Confucianist versus Moist. There's some of those things you mentioned are going to be brought up. There's also going to be actually yang and yin and yang also get mentioned. There's a lot in this book, and much of what you were talking about there does get talked about at some length in it. So we'll certainly get to explicitly reach some of those topics about good and evil and Confucianists and the like. I think regarding the pipes, the other part of this section 1 that really jumps out to me is not only do I have here something very valuable, because I like the Eleatics, I like their metaphysics, but one thing Parmenides and Melissus and Zeno, what they are really lacking is any clear statement on political theory and moral theory and how we ought to behave. I think that's something they're either not focused on it, or what they said has been largely lost. And so you get some of it in their biographies that are written much later, but what I'm getting from ZhuangZi is, in part, that the hinting at or the beginnings of something I can use, where I can come from someone who recognizes that there's a unity or a flattening or a commonality of all things, and he's also explicitly talking about people, maybe a story of how they can transcend the you and the me and see that whole, which is, I think a unique contribution and a way for me to use that and then draw a picture of how we ought to grow up and pass away, while explicitly tying it to the metaphysics, which is what ZhuangZi is doing here. In regards to the pipes of men, yep.
It depends on where we focus our attention and our awareness, our conscious awareness. If we are constantly focusing on our own self or our ego or our self-interest, then of course we see ourselves detached from the rest of the world, and seeing the unity of the world is hidden. But if we start to focus more on the connections between what we see, we will figure out that we are not self-made human beings. There is no such thing as a self-made man. All the wisdom that we have acquired, we have either acquired it thanks to the legacy of people who lived from centuries to thousands of years ago, and also from the most influential people in our lives. So there is no sage appearing in a vacuum. There's always, for a person to become wiser, there needs to be wisdom passing down from the past, basically. In Buddhist terms, there is this concept of codependent generation, which is even, according to some Buddhist scholars, the closest that the Buddhists can speak about a god, basically. So something that is responsible for everything that happens in the universe of physicality that we can see across time. And since you mentioned Socrates, when talking about Socrates, people are tempted to exactly think that he's a sage that appeared in a vacuum, because the people who taught him are not very famous. And at least 3 people that I know taught him, and 2 of those were women. So it was a sophist, I think Hippias, who gave him some lectures, but Socrates didn't even pay the full package, so he only got the light lectures. He also learned from Aspasia, who was a Milesian, of all people, from Ionia, who taught him rhetoric, and also taught Pericles as well, and Diotima, who was a priestess from Mantinea, which is close to Sparta, to the Peloponnese. And Diotima actually gave a really interesting concept that maybe can inspire you to connect with a broader metaphysics, metaphysics that actually works. So when someone is thrown into this world, they, as you say aptly, they only think about themselves. But when they suddenly grow enough to develop a crush for someone else, they start to desire someone else, somebody else. And this initial crush, this first step, is normally a physical one. But then this first step is the raw material, or it allows the conscience of this person to get in a position to take further steps, like realizing that this other person that they desire, or some other person that they eventually get to know better in a relationship, actually has a mind with the same depth and richness that they ascribe to themselves. And from then on, the certain barriers, I should say, of metaphysics in the mind of that person can start to break down, and the person can start to realize that all people are interconnected, and the quality of this interconnectedness is directly related to how people care for each other. It's not just constrained to the romantic or erotic kind of love or attraction, but it's a social, more philosophical kind of love that is, in Plato's words, more related to beauty itself and also wisdom. And so I really, this concept is called Diotimus ladder, as in it really has several ranks in which a single individual kind of graduates in this scale of love. Well, the Greeks even have many different words for love, to go from this more self-centered and selfish form of love, like Eros, then to go to Philia, Sophros, to Agape. The Agape is the highest form of love. The other one is brotherly love and friendly love. That's the term I'm forgetting. But I think it's a really interesting concept that might connect with a metaphysics of unity.
Yeah, and speaking about Socrates' purported teachers and metaphysics of unity. If we're taking all the accounts as equal, I suppose we could take Plato's account that Socrates met with Parmenides, right? And put Parmenides as one of his teachers. And I did read an interesting theory as well that Socrates might have gone to the island of Samos and met with Melissus. I have to dig up that journal article again because it was interesting. So there we go. We have 2 more teachers for him, and those 2 are particularly interested in the unity of all things. I did want to speak about the pipes of men and the pipes of earth, because that's the second part, or the second reason why I find this section very meaningful. So the first reason why I found this section meaningful, of course, is that it's giving me a way to directly tie human psychology or human maturation or a story of being a person and how we should think about things to the metaphysics. But the other way it was of interest to me is because of these pipes and how I think it ends, which is that nothing lies behind things. Now, some of the commentators think that it's a rhetorical question, or it's not a rhetorical question. He believes that there's some sort of demiurge or transmogrifier or Zhawu, a thing that makes things. But let's just follow the text as I'm reading it and how certain commentators like ZhuangZi's read it, because the pipes, I think, are very interesting, and the second reason why I like this section. So he says, look, maybe you've heard about the pipes of men, maybe you've heard about the pipes of heaven, doesn't mean you've heard about, pipes of earth, doesn't mean you've heard about the pipes of heaven. And Zhu is like, how does that work? And he says, ZhuangZi says, when the great lump burps up vital energy, it comes to be called wind. This is quiescent. Okay, so the great lump, it literally is just a big lump of something. It says da, which is like big or great here, and then qua or kwai. So yeah, just like a big chunk of something. I guess maybe earth. And then it expels or burps up, as the translation is, or it breathes out qi, which I guess is being translated as vital energy. And it just says this qi is a qi ming wei feng. So this named is wind. So it's basically saying like there's a big lump and it issues forth wind. And sometimes it's quiescent, sometimes it's quiet. But when it's active, all the different cavities howl furiously. So it's like, all right, the pipes of earth, it's like there's a planet, there's all these things like caves and forests and, hills and mountains and all that stuff. And when the wind blows, the myriad cavities howl furiously. And so, you've heard this surely, Zhuyo, the forests and everything blowing loudly. And it's as if the cavities in the earth or in the daquar is noses and mouths and ears, and roof supports and coops and mortars and pools and puddles, and that the sound of this wind blowing in the forests and mountains and everything, I guess, is like a hoot, a shriek, a gasp, a yell, a moan, guffaw, and howl. But so that's the way of earth. And then Zhuyo says, so the pipes of earth are all those cavities. Okay, so we got that story where there's like a big lump, it issues forth wind, and the pipes of earth are the sound of the wind echoing through all those things, like the caves and the forests. The pipes of men are those lined up bamboo tubes. Okay, so according to the commentator ZhuangZi as well, the Tianlai, or that's Tianlai. No, the pipes of men, I guess what is it here, Renlai, is like a pan pipe. Okay, so I guess instead of a da kuai, like a big lump, we have a person blowing through bamboo tubes. So the pipes of man is a guy blowing through bamboo tubes. The pipes of earth is the wind coming out and like echoing in the forest and caves. And then he's like, what's the pipes of heaven? And here's where I think it gets really interesting for me, and why I have this second reason to read 2.1. Because he says, well, when the pipes of heaven blow, they are infinitely varied. Okay, well, the word infinite there, no. Obviously, infinite is a word wrought with trouble and how we to define it. Looking at the Chinese there, it to me seems to be saying that all of the things that are not the same. So it blows into all these differentiated things. And they come of their own accord, with all completed of its own accord. Nothing lies behind the puffing into action. And if we look at Guoxiang, he says, Guoxiang sees Tian Lai, the pipes of heaven, essentially as 自然, what causes itself to be how it is at work. It is a case of arising naturally, not a case of being produced by ego self. What is it that puffs up and causes it to be what it is? Well, either way, my reading of it, and I guess Guoxiang's reading here, is that things are what they are in their own right and don't have anything puffing them out. So the guy blows in the tubes, the wind rustles in the caves. What's behind all of that activity? There's no one behind that activity. No one's puffing it into action. It all just is what it is. They come of their own accord, and they're completed of their own accord. What need of someone to blow them or rustle them or agitate them? They are what they are, and they do what they do. And so I see it as as metaphysically significant or meaningful, because it's saying you don't need they're not positing some sort of person behind the scene that's agitating people in heaven and that people in heaven are dependent on. It's saying that the people blowing into the pipes are the people blowing into the pipes. The wind rustling in the caves and the forest is the wind rustling in the caves and the forest. It comes of its own accord. It's completed of its own accord. Nothing lies behind the puffing into action. So it's like a complete system with no outside interference, which is extremely naturalistic reading of it. But Guoxiang is one of the earliest commentators, if not the earliest, and he has this naturalist reading of it. And ontologically, everything is self-caused. Everything is what it is, and is not made to be what it is by something that is other than what it is. I see a hand up, Roger, so please feel free to speak.
I also found it really interesting how in the text the pipes of earth have such a richness and depth of different characters used, or different words actually, for all the phenomena of nature, basically. They are kind of glorifying and showing how awesome nature and its variety is, its awesome variety is. And then, in contrast, the pipes of humans, of men, are just, they're just a bunch of equally sized bamboo stems cut to size, all equal. And so the pipes of humanity are without variety. We just cut things down to suit our needs, and we don't deal in the same kind of chaos, so to speak, as nature does effortlessly. We need things to be regular in our civilization, in our society, etc. But then he goes to the pipes of heaven and just says that they are infinite in variety. They don't even attempt to use words to describe all this variety. They just go very laconic, but show how awesome the pipes of heaven are in comparison to the other two. The other two can't hold a candle to the pipes of heaven. And again, it seems that since the pipes of heaven are also self-sufficient, they kind of blow themselves and don't need for something else to blow on them. Again, it really equates with the Tao that Lao Tzu mentions in his Tao Te Ching. in a passage where he says, where he describes the chain of consequence and antecedents, and then he stops at the Tao and says that the Tao kind of swirls around on itself, and it's perfectly self-contained and self-sufficient. And this text seems to tell the same kind of lesson in a different way, a more artistic way, I would say, maybe for a different audience than the Tao Te Ching, perhaps. The Tao Te Ching is a bit more, in a way, technical, and this here is more dialogical. Of course, we have the characters talking to each other, and it's a bit more colorful in terms of the vocabulary, with all these kind of whimsical expressions like puffing into action and guffaw and howl and shriek and whatnot. So these terms are kind of funny, and they're talking about something extremely serious, but they're kind of being funny about it in the true style of ZhuangZi. So yeah, I thought this really a really interesting part that stood out to me.
Yeah, there's a few other readings of these pipes. One that's interesting. I'm just looking at the annotations here. One that's interesting is looks like this commentator was writing the 18th century, and he writes. No, not that one. Okay, so this other commentator, he says he's drawing this comparison. He's saying like human life, cognition, and behavior. How are these different from the singing of the cavities? And so it's almost like, okay, so you told us the pipes of man is just blowing into some pipes and making some sound. Well, the pipes of earth is the wind rustling around in the mountain. Are we essentially saying what's the difference between people making sounds and the wind making sound? I suppose we would get into a discussion then of personal experience and identity to try and not refute that, but go further into it. But, one thing I do have a problem with this book, this Inner Chapters of the ZhuangZi with copious annotations, is that it never gives you one full commentary. So it's just like it's selectively choosing commentators and then quoting them piecemeal with these footnotes, which is fine. It will alert you to something that is interesting. But I think what I'll do, because we've reached the end of 2.1, what I'll do is I will actually, here I've got a copy of Guoxiang's commentary, and so let me just read from here, because this is an early commentator from the Han Dynasty, or I guess from the chaos that followed it, and I think it'll be good to actually read this full paragraph from the commentary. So we go right to the end there. Let's see what we'll take it from. It says, Zhu said, "Then the pipes of earth are just all the hollows, and the pipes of man are just bamboo panpipes. But may I be so bold as to ask what the pipes of heaven are?" Zhi said, "They blow through the myriad things differently, since they allow them all to act on their own." Now, one thing I'll say about this translation is it's saying what I already pointed out, which is that the infinite variety, the use of infinity there in the translation from the Inner Chapters with Copious Annotations book is, I think, unwise, just because I get into so many disputes about what infinity means. But you can see here it says a myriad thing, all the different things. So, may I be so bold as to ask what the pipes of heaven are? Zhi said, "They blow through the myriad things differently, since they allow them all to act on their own." Okay, so something about the pipes of heaven is that it's just the existence of all things. It's just the fact of their existence allows them to be what they are. And here's the commentary from Guoxiang. He says, "This explains the pipes of heaven. How could the pipes of heaven ever be something yet again separate and different? Things such as all the hollows and bamboo panpipes are categories of phenomenal existence, which all together constitute a single heaven." Again, Tian. So all the categories or things like the hollows and the bamboo panpipes, according to Guoxiang, taking them all together, they constitute a single heaven. And the word heaven there is the same as the pipes of heaven. So the pipes of heaven are Tian Lai. And the thing which all these bamboo panpipes, the Ren Lai, all the hollows, the Di Lai, they all just come together and constitute one thing, which is the pipes of heaven. So he's saying that the pipes of heaven are just the pipes of man and the pipes of earth, all taken together and unified, and they are what they are, and the pipes of heaven just allow them to be what they are. And he says, nothingness is just that, nothingness. So it can't generate phenomenal reality, the extant or somethingness. Just as generation of the extant is not caused, something extant cannot cause anything else to generate. So he's saying two things there, which are, again, right. I mean, anyone who loves Parmenides and Melissus is going to love this. He's saying, one, you don't get something from nothing, right? Let's put aside the fact that nothingness is problematic. He's just saying you get what you got. You don't get something you don't have. And what you don't have isn't going to give you anything. And then he's saying the second point, which is very important, and I think comes up in Melissus, is just as generation of the extant is not caused, presumably from nothing, something extant, like me, you, or the pipes of man, or the pipes of earth, or whatever, something extant cannot cause anything else to generate. So like one thing cannot generate another thing, which, that's a point made by Melissus. Very important point, I think. It's not just you can't get something from nothing, you can't get something from something that is not that thing. Because how would we? How would you get a pear from an apple if an apple does not have a pear? But so he's saying, you don't get anything from nothing, and you don't get something from that which is not that something. Since this is so, what is it then that generates this generation? Actually, clod-like, Quairan, so intrinsic. We'll just roll with this. This translation says, actually, clod-like things generate themselves. So things, again, you can't get them from nothing. You can't get them from things that are not them. So therefore, everything is self-generated or self-sustaining or is what it is. Things just self-generate and do not cause themselves to generate. So it's not causal relationship, because again, how could you have causal? It's not like I could generate myself before I exist. That's an argument you find in Parmenides and Melissus, that you can't, Melissus again explicitly is talking about this, where you can't, if you don't have how could something cause itself to exist before it exists, right? So it's not a causal thing, it's just self-generated is almost just self-present, self-naturally so. Things just self-generate and do not cause themselves to generate. Since I cannot generate something else cannot generate me either. As such, I am spontaneously what I am. The natural is not made or caused, and that is why it is referred to by the term heaven, Tian, again, the pipes of heaven, an expression used to clarify the spontaneity or naturality or, ziran involved. How could heaven here mean the sky with its deep azure color? Yet some say that the pipes of heaven control things and make them obey heaven, but heaven can't even cause itself to exist, so how much the less can it cause anything else to exist? Therefore, heaven is the general term for the myriad things. So Guoxiang is saying that the pipes of heaven, the word heaven there, let's read it. Heaven is the general term for the myriad things. It's almost like he's saying heaven is what is, or being. Again, a very Eleatic reading, but again, this is why I find this section in ZhuangZi, and I'm a particularly big fan of Guoxiang, is because it's very exciting, right? This is exactly the sort of stuff I want to see in a metaphysical text. And since not any one thing corresponds to heaven, what master is there to control things? Thus it is that everything generates itself. There is no other source from which things come, such as the Tao of heaven. So everything is what it is in its own right. One thing cannot generate another thing. Nothing can't generate something. There's no particular thing that corresponds with the whole any more than any other thing corresponds with the whole. And that's the Tao of heaven. That is the way it is. It is what it is. So I don't know if I'm reading my thoughts into Guoxiang, and certainly many have said Guoxiang is reading his thoughts into the ZhuangZi, but that is the second reason why I think this 2.1 and generally the Qi Wu Luan chapter itself is extremely relevant to both my metaphysics and inspiring in terms of my attempts to, having taken the metaphysics, which obviously the Eleatics do a great job of establishing already, but then going beyond that and trying to get into how we should behave or view that and do things like mature. So I'm glad I have this copy of Guoxiang's commentary, because the inner chapters of the ZhuangZi with copious annotations from the Chinese commentaries is fine. I like it. I like the way they line up the text and everything, but I think they try to maybe do too much with too little, in the sense that they can only put so much in one edition or on one page, and so they get all these different commentators, highlight what each commentator thinks about various parts of the text, but they can't present the commentator as a whole, because then they would just be, this book would be like 10,000 pages long. But still, it tips you off on what the various different commentators think, and then you can follow those threads yourself, which I suppose is what I did. I went and grabbed my copy of Guoxiang and reread it. But yeah, so that's what I had to say about that. I think actually I am going to, next time I do 2.2, maybe we'll do it Friday or early tomorrow morning or something. I will, not tomorrow morning, maybe next week or something. But I will also maybe rely more heavily on, I will use the green book to tip myself off onto which commentators are interesting, and then maybe I'll go and I'll pull the commentators and make sure I can present them in full rather than paraphrased or piecemeal. But yeah, those are the two reasons why I think it's very interesting 2.1. And again, the book itself is to me both metaphysically significant and also a rare opportunity to see someone take a metaphysics of absolute unity and leveling out or flatness or commonality of all things and try to say how it impacts us in our psychology, in our maturation, and as we'll see as we go through the chapter, how we discuss what is right and what is wrong, how different philosophical school like Confucianists and Moists argue with each other, and also how a sage should behave. This is also, this book Qi Wu Luan has all of the, not all of them, but a number of the famous quotes from ZhuangZi. This is the source of a meme that I saw recently where a person, now I'm going really off topic, but later we'll encounter this story. I saw a meme on the internet that had a person, and he says, in the morning the trolley will run over one person, and in the evening I'll pull the lever and it will run over 5 people. Or in the morning it can run over 5 people, and then I'll pull a lever, and in the afternoon it will roll over 1 person. Which one would you prefer?
Yeah, it's the story of the monkeys and the bananas.
Exactly. It's the guy who asks the monkeys, you want 3 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, and they get mad. And then he's like, all right, well, 4 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, and they're all happy. And essentially for the sage, if he sees that these are both the same, or that ultimately all adds up to the same amount, he can be very practical and realize, okay, well, these particular monkeys behave that way with the 7 that organized that way, and this other way if the 7 are organized the other way. I can appreciate both. I see the big picture. I see it's all one and the same at the end of the day. And, so a very interesting book. I'll probably end it there, but thank you, Roger, for all your commentary. Katja, I see you're also here. You can speak if you like, but I'll probably close out the space pretty soon. We've been going for, it looks like a little over an hour now. And yeah, very excited to make our way through book 2 of the ZhuangZi. And I'll probably pick it up again on Friday, or at the very latest sometime next week. And I'll do a little bit more work to make sure I have more from the commentators. But generally, it's very, very, from my perspective as someone who is inclined towards Eleatic philosophy and metaphysics, there's something very promising about this. And I think it's one of the, if not the best or my favorite metaphysical works from ancient China. Obviously, I did a space on other texts like the Zhou chapter of the ZhuangZi and others, but the ZhuangZi just as a whole seems to be well deserving the reputation it has as a very significant work on metaphysics. And I think I mentioned earlier in the space, I've read the Tao Te Ching, obviously, but I find myself having revisited ZhuangZi more often than the Tao Te Ching. Although we did a series of spaces on Wang Bi and his commentary. Actually, we did it on an essay he wrote, but Wang Bi is a famous commentator on the Tao Te Ching, so I guess I have revisited that text as well a number of times over the years. But Roger, if you have anything else to say, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I will call it a day.
Yeah, sure. I will try to keep it short, like ending remarks. I think that your path is interesting because beyond your focus on the Eleatics and Monists in general, it seems that you're trying to gain this mindset of thinking like the ancient sages were supposed to think. Completely in contrast to this caricature of human beings who are kind of locked or trapped in their time perception, like the monkeys that ZhuangZi makes fun of in his writings. And so I think you also kind of get into the mindset of someone who can actually extract some value of texts like this as well. So I think it's really, really interesting to listen from you, reading on these texts and commenting on them. And so I'm looking forward to accompanying you throughout these texts as well.
Great. I hope to see you in the future spaces. It'll be a good number of spaces actually, because the text book 2 is fairly long. So I imagine it will be like we'll be here next month, and I'll still be making spaces on this. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we have this metaphysical view of all as one, or all unified, or all leveled out, or flattened, and it just seems to be very important that we also be able to have that inform all the other partisan judgments or limited judgments we make, or at least be aware of how those limited judgments might be impacted by the broader metaphysics. And I don't get that from the fragments of Melissus or whoever, but I do think I get it from people like ZhuangZi. And so, very important text. All right, thank you, Roger. Thank you, everyone else who showed up. I know people came in and out throughout the time where space was open. But I will do this again next week, and hopefully I will have less technical problems with the microphone and phone and everything. All right, see everyone later.